Can BC and a winless UVA doesn't get much more must win than this for BC. Can they pull it off, or are we in for another disappointment in Chestnut Hill?
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Locked On BC. If you're listening on YouTube, it's Thursday, and thank you for joining us live. With me today, I got staff writer at Eagle Insider, Mitchell T. Wolf. Mitch, how's it going?
Doing good. Excited to talk about this game, as it's one that I think BC has a very good chance of winning for once.
Don't jinx anything.
I just said I think, and I've been very wrong before, multiple times this season.
Yeah. I don't even want people to go back and look at our NIU predictions because that was ugly. But we're looking at two teams, a combined 1-7 on the season. Definitely two of the lower teams in the ACC, but one team's going to have to go out and win this thing. We're going to do this our usual Friday format. Mitch and I are going to go over what BC wins this game if they do what, UVA wins if what happens, predictions, and then our 3 FanDuel picks of the week. And we'll get into that in our final segment. So, Mitch, let's kick this off. What does BC have to do? Let me try that again. BC wins this game if what happens?
They need to run the ball. And you mentioned that it's going to be a rainy game. I think that is good for BC because Virginia's run defense is one of the worst in the nation. And, BC's run defense is obviously, not the 85 Bears or anything, but if you look at UVA's run defense statistics, they are 111th in rushing yards allowed per game. They are 126th in rushing EPA per play, and they allow a 51.7% rushing success rate, which is 129th in the country. Additionally, according to PFF, as a unit, they are dead last in run defense at 51.2. They are 133rd. And BC has been able to run the ball pretty effectively so far this season. Obviously, the game got out of hand quickly against Louisville, but they've been able to run the ball against other opponents pretty well. They average 0.19 rushing EPA per play, which is 12th, and they have a rushing success rate of 45.9%, which is 34th in the country. So BC is able to run the ball. That's not really in question. And if they can lean on their running backs, Kai Robichaux, Jeff Hafley said he's a little nicked up from the Florida State game, but he's back and healthy. And he also said Pat Garwood and Alex Broom are finally healthy. So, BC's got 3 good running backs they can lean on who all bring different kinds of skill sets. And then that's not even considering Thomas Castellanos, who is a great runner. And through the first few weeks of the season, Virginia has struggled against running quarterbacks in Brennan Armstrong, Jordan McLeod at James Madison, and even Joe Milton at Tennessee. So they're out, and as earlier in the week, the podcast woman from 247 Wahoos or whatever it is, she mentioned that Virginia is really banged up on defense, especially in the linebacker room, and they're missing their best defensive end, Cam Butler. So I see no reason why BC shouldn't be able to run the ball, control the clock, and give their defense plenty of rest in this game. On the other side of the ball, I kind of get why UVA is going back to Tony Muskett in that they don't really respect BC's passing defense, and frankly, why should you? So they're going to go with a quarterback who can keep the car between the lines and is going to run the offense effectively and not make a ton of mistakes that'll take them out of the game, as opposed to Anthony Calandria, who, man, I mean, he's really fun to watch just because he is throwing that pigskin all over the place. There's a statistic from the Sickos committee on Twitter that they came up with called DETMER, which is downfield eventful throwing metric encouraging ripping it. So essentially, how much of a YOLO ball quarterback are you? And I believe when I looked up, I ran the statistic myself, and Calandria is 8th in the country in Detmer. So he is, he was just throwing the ball everywhere and, kind of being risky with it. And he kind of threw them out of the games against Maryland and even NC State, where they almost won. But, Muskett is a former FCS All-American, but he doesn't really run much or he doesn't run much or well. And he's pretty accurate in short areas of the field, but he doesn't really have a big arm. So, in the rain, that's going to be helpful for BC in terms of their defense. And obviously, Virginia's offensive line is an absolute dumpster fire, kind of like BC's line last year. So if they can finally get some pressure on the quarterback, force Muskett to make risky throws, or they bring Calandria, because he can actually throw them back into this game, I think that's how BC wins it, by kind of using the weather to their advantage, honestly.
And I had texted you earlier, given one of the stats I saw was that UVA runs, I think they average 2 yards a carry, if I remember correctly. The number I saw.
Yeah, they are. Let me see. Well, that's their. Oh, in terms of them rushing, I don't know that stat off the top of my head, but yeah, I know that their 2 main running backs. Well, they have 3 running backs they use.
They average 2.17 yards per carry.
Yeah, and that's obviously includes sacks, and they've had a lot of those. But the 2 first running backs, Paris Jones and Kobe Pace, they average 3.4 yards a carry, and Mike Collins, the other running back who has the most carries, he averages only 1.8 yards per carry. So, this offensive line doesn't particularly block well, and the running backs don't really have enough to create on their own. And now that they've removed Anthony Calandria from the equation as who's a quarterback who can run a little more, I just think that makes their offense even less dynamic.
So I said to Mitch, does BC's defense take the approach that every team took against BC last year? You're playing as a team that has no offensive line, that can't run the ball. Do you just tee off on the passing attack? And what was your thoughts on that, Mitch?
I definitely think you do, because, again, I think BC's offensive line or defensive line, for all their problems, and I think that the defensive line has actually done a decent job in run defense. It's kind of more on the second level players that have been allowing the explosive plays. Cam Horsley's having a pretty good season, and Virginia's interior offensive line is not very good, and they're a little undersized. So I think that he can win that matchup easily. And then, like you mentioned on an episode earlier this week, this is a game where Donovan Ezeiruaku should really be able to finally be unleashed, because I know Virginia's going to, try to double him, hit him with chips and everything, but the Virginia right tackle, Ugana Nanana, I believe is how it's pronounced. He is performing a lot worse than any of BC's offensive line was last year. I looked it up. His PFF passing grade is 24.9, which is 8th in the country among FBS offensive tackles who have played, I think, at least 100 snaps. And then I looked at Nick Thomas last year for BC, and his grade was, I think, 47.9 or something. So essentially double what Nanana has been doing. And he's allowed a ton of sacks. He's committed some penalties. So, I think Ezeiruaku can dominate that matchup, even if he is getting chipped. But it also helps that this quarterback is not one who's going to be able to move around enough to evade these pass rushers. So they don't really have to worry about using what Hafley calls cage rush, where they, slow it down and just try to slowly condense the pocket and not let the quarterback escape. They don't need to worry about that this week. So they can just go after the quarterback and even not really worry about the run game, because again, I think they've hit a few explosives here and there with Paris Jones, he's a much smaller back who has some good speed. But again, I think BC's defensive line can perform well enough. It's kind of just not then on the linebackers to make enough plays to prevent explosives from happening.
All right. Now, what happens if UVA wins this game? What happens?
I think you have to have, some of BC's boogeymen show up again. You have to, if BC tries throwing the ball, if they have a ton of drops again. And I think I told you this, that Castellanos has suffered the most drops of any quarterback in the FBS and the third most of any quarterback in NCAA college football. And it's third most because the first 2 guys are tied with 16. Castellanos has 15. So that's been a huge problem. If the penalty issues pop up again, and, I know there were some very badly timed penalties against Louisville, but I think BC only committed 7 for 60, which I said going into that week, I was like, if they can do that, I'm not going to be upset, because, that's a decently average number of penalties. So if drops are a problem, if penalties are a problem, if, I think those are realistic things that happen. If
the defense can't get off the field.
Yeah. If the pass defense, if the guys, they're, just, messing up their assignments. If, again, I don't really think Muskett can hit those deep passes. And additionally, I think you talked about this with Jacqueline, that, Virginia really only uses 2 receivers. They have Malik Washington and Malachi Fields. They have 69.4% of the team's targets and the same number of receptions. So Washington has 41, Fields has 38. The next closest guy has 6 targets. So they're really the only 2 things that's going well for this offense. So BC needs to find ways to double team those receivers. But in terms of if they are winning those matchups, if Malik Washington is creating after the catch, if Malachi Fields is posting up and winning those contested catches, and that allows them to keep the offense moving, that's how Virginia's offense can maybe score some points. And on the other side of the ball, I think it would have to all be self-inflicted wounds because, looking at Virginia's defense, especially with the injuries and the players they're missing and how much rotation they're going to have to do with a lot younger players, I think that BC's really biggest obstacles themselves rather than Virginia's defense, because the Virginia defense has just been really, really bad so far this season.
All right. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions. You're not going to want to hear. You're going to want to hear this. I think both of us are going to go in a little different directions. So I want to tell you about Nutrafol. Now, you don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. So it supports healthy hair growth by targeting root causes of thinning, such as stress hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. And it works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol men's hair growth supplements. So take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Find out why 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men. That's spelled Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Locked on BC, AJ Black here, and it is time to start giving out our predictions. And I think one of us has a spicier take than the other, so I'm going to go first, and I'm going to save the spicy take for Mitch for second. I have been bit over and over since I've had this podcast. We're going on 3 years now, and BC has bit me all seemingly nonstop whenever I feel confident that BC is going to win this game comfortably. Under Jeff Hafley, he is, other than maybe the Colgate game, and there might be another one, maybe Georgia Tech in 2020. It feels like BC has never put away a team. They're always battling with them. It's always back and forth. And given what I've seen this year between the drops, the penalties, the defensive issues, God knows what else is going to show up in this game. Weather, maybe they have fumble problems. Who knows? They haven't had it yet, but who knows? I think this game is going to be closer than people expect. I'm still confident that BC has more explosive players than UVA. I think that Thomas Castellanos really is the difference maker in this game because I think he's the best player on the two teams, and he's the difference maker. So I'm going to have the defense struggling. I'm going to say that UVA is going to have their way. They're going to be able to move the ball effectively, but I'm going to think it's a high-scoring game. I'm going to go something like 35-31 Boston College, and I think that makes them covering, which I didn't think I was going to go that route, but 35-31 BC.
So like you said, I'll go a little spicier. Based on everything I've seen watching Virginia, and I watched their first 4 games, and I actually had access to the All-22 for their defense against Tennessee, which was interesting. They have gotten a lot better since week 1. They have gotten better every week, I would argue. They are still a really bad team. They just do not have the talent at multiple positions on both sides of the ball, especially the offensive line, and now that they're really banged up on the defensive side of the ball. The other issue for me is that Castellanos is getting better every week. Like we said, he had one of the best games among any offensive player in the Hafley era, and frankly, just any player on either side of the ball. He was awesome against Louisville, just had the drops issue. If he could, and he's gotten better every week as well. If he continues that, this is the worst defense he's played all year. Maybe, kind of, I would say it's comparable to Holy Cross. He should be able to take advantage of this for a big game, even with the weather. Like, even if they have to kind of, let the passing game take a back seat, and it's more on the run game, both for him and the running backs. But, this team is coming off a game where they got embarrassed by Louisville. And I think, maybe they were riding a little high coming off Florida State, like, hey, we finally figured something out. We can come into this game and do well. And, like we talked about, some things kind of got out of hand quickly, and it really turned against them. And they had guys make mistakes too. So, and again, the coaching has been frustrating with kind of just how guys are not learning and, fixing those mistakes. So with all that being said, I think BC wins this one relatively comfortably. I think the rain is helpful. That's going to limit an already pretty terrible Virginia offense. And as you discussed earlier this week, this defense is just too banged up to really, frankly, do anything, in my opinion, to BC's offense. Because BC's offense, say what you will about the defense, the rest of the team, this offense is scoring points. They've scored at least 24 in every game, and they're getting better. And Castellanos said this week,
defenses too. Louisville and Florida State weren't bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like those are real defenses, and they've been able to put points on the board. And I guess you could say like one of those touchdowns was defensive against Florida State, so maybe throw that. So, but the point is, this team is averaging like 25 plus a game. So I feel good about this offense being able to move the ball on a very terrible Virginia defense at home. I think this team knows. Like, I think that's kind of the thing is I think they know that they are beating themselves, they are making mistakes, and they need to do better. And the coaches know they need to coach better as well. But I know we kind of make fun of the Hafley saying it's going to turn and it'll come together to be beautiful and all that. But I really do think that this is the kind of team where that can happen, because if Virginia team is really bad, I would say that they are worse than BC at every position group and every matchup. So BC should be able to win this game comfortably. And again, something will probably happen that makes that not true. Like you said, fumble luck hasn't really bitten them so far this season. So we're kind of waiting on that shoe to drop. But I still think BC wins this one comfortably. I actually made the score a little closer from my original prediction, but I'm going to stick with BC 38, UVA 24.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to even go bigger blowout than that.
No, I think the rain helped. The rain made me cool down off BC a little bit. And again, I really just can't trust this defense until they show me. So, I'm sure that, Malik Washington will have some big play where he breaks tackle and goes for a big gain. But even when I was watching this game, like a lot of these Virginia play, and obviously these are plays that got BC beaten, but they were kind of these fluky scramble plays where Calandre was just running around, and it's kind of like the Castellanos 4th down conversion against NIU, where he's just running around and he flings it across the field and they make a miracle catch. And as we saw with Calandre, that's just not sustainable. And, we've seen Castellanos improve in terms of, hey, like I don't need to scramble and run around. I can actually make plays from the pocket. So I think we do see this being BC's most complete game of the season. And, it could end up at the end of the year being the most complete game of the season as well. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with BC 38, UVA 24.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment where Mitch and I are going to give our picks of the week as we look at some FanDuel lines to talk about our 3 choices. So snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I know Mitch has always been going with that Iowa or Iowa State over-under. Maybe you want to follow on that as well, and you can do that all on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Locked On BC, AJ Black, here from Eagle Insider. I'm the host. And if you have not signed up for Eagle Insider, I've been saying this all week, we're starting hockey coverage. I know there's a lot of puckheads out there in the BC world. We brought on BC Hockey Blogger, who's a very popular hockey writer. He has his season preview up, and I'm going to try to get him on the podcast, I think, in the next week or so to talk about BC hockey. So prepare for that, but head over to Eagle Insider, 50% off a annual VIP subscription. You get Mitch's game films, you get BC Hockey Blogger, you get all my recruiting news, everything in between. Head over to Eagle Insider right now. Make sure you sign up for that. All right, Mitch. So you're always good with the stats. Where are we at in terms of our picks?
So I've had a rough last week was pretty rough, going 1-3, which brought me down to 8-8. Luckily you're doing even worse, although you've picked it up as of late, to make it a little better. So you are currently sitting at 5-10-1, thanks to Notre Dame pushing a +3 spread against Ohio State last week.
Oh, I thought it was 3.5.
Well, I have it in the spreadsheet as 3, so I'm sorry to tell you that.
Okay. All right. Whatever. All right. So Mitch, let's get to our 3 picks of the week. So obviously we both are taking BC in the points. What BC, are your
BC -3.5, by the way, and the over/under is
53.5. It's
52.5. And honestly, like I said, I think even with the rain, I would take that over because neither defense is very good. So, 53.5. I thought I had it at 52.
I looked it up right before we recorded.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I would take the over there. Actually, yeah, on FanDuel it did move down to 52.5. So I would still take the over there. I think neither defense is very good, so I would take the over and take BC. But in terms of my first pick, I'm going to go USC minus 21.5 at Colorado. And the reason why is that I know Colorado can score, and I know that they're going to be they're going to want to put Shadur Sanders up against Caleb Williams. In terms of, hey, this kid deserves some Heisman hype too. And I know USC's defense is not very good / doesn't care. With that being said, Colorado's defense is even worse. USC can still run the ball very well against a Colorado defense that can't stop the run to save their lives. And we've seen that the rest of the teams in the Pac-12, and I think the rest of the teams in the country, want to take every opportunity they can to stick it to Colorado for being relatively mouthy. We saw the clip from that cinematic recap that Oregon put out where Deion's son Shiloh was talking a whole mess of crap to Oregon about being so little and then promptly getting his butt ran over. So I think you're going to see every team give Colorado their best shot. Even though Colorado, is not a top, they're probably not a ranked team anymore. They're still building. The way that this season is played out narrative wise, other teams are going to want to destroy them and embarrass them. So, and I think that you've got a lot of guys that might know each other from previous schools or kind of just being from the West Coast. So, I think USC wins, even though their defense is bad, and I would not be shocked if Colorado backdoors this, but I think USC wins by at least 30, and they're going to embarrass Colorado.
Sounds like a fun one. I'm going to go with the South's oldest rivalry, Georgia and Auburn. I'm going to take Georgia at minus 14. Auburn is 3-1, and obviously this is a big rivalry game, but Auburn, as the saying goes, ain't played anyone yet. In the one game that they did play,
Auburn ain't played nobody, pal.
Yeah, they played, let's see, UMass, they played Samford and Cal, all terrible teams.
And Cal took them to the wire.
Yeah, and then they didn't do anything against Texas A&M, who lost their starting quarterback in the middle of the game. I don't have any faith Auburn can hang with them. I don't, I think they just changed their quarterback. I think Georgia is a machine. They're going to, probably win by 21 in this one.
Yeah, I would agree with this one too. I mean, again, I don't know why, but I have a general antipathy towards Auburn. I have no reason to. I just don't like them. So yeah, I'll be rooting for this one along with you. My second one, and we're going back to Old Faithful. We're going Iowa under, and Iowa's playing Michigan State this week. So we're on quit watch with this game because Michigan State is obviously kind of really going through right now in the post Mel Tucker era. I think the Cover 3 podcast mentioned this, but I mean, we saw that the writers' strike ended, but I think we could see the wide receiver strike start soon at Iowa because I feel like those receivers should just unionize themselves and be like, hey, listen, this is really dumb. We're not getting any targets because this offense is absolute garbage. Neither team can really score at this point. Iowa's defense is decent, maybe not up to their normal standard, but it's clear that Iowa is being bad on offense, kind of purposely, just to try to stick it to the media. And, the contract for Brian Ferentz says 25 points a game, but they say the contract terminates if he doesn't reach those numbers. That doesn't preclude Kirk Ferentz from retiring and essentially appointing his son as the next head coach for Iowa, which I think is I think the phrase from the community is the darkest timeline. I think that we're approaching that for Iowa football at this point. So Iowa, Michigan State under 36.5.
Okay. My next pick is going to the ACC, and I am picking Syracuse plus 6.5 against Clemson. Mm-hmm. Garrett Schrader has been very, very good. He's one of the most underrated quarterbacks, I think, in the ACC, and he's played at a level that's very high. Clemson always struggles with Syracuse, it seems like. And with Syracuse undefeated, I think this game is going to come down to the wire. I'm not ready to pick them straight out, but I do think I will take Syracuse to cover.
Yeah, they would say Clemson never does well in the Dome. With Syracuse, it's hard to tell with them because they played Army and they were losing the first half and they came back and kind of put them away, but they haven't really played a lot of good teams. They're missing Rondé Gadsden, who was probably their best offensive player besides Schrader. And Clemson, I'm sure, is going to be very unhappy after, frankly, playing a game where they very easily could have beaten Florida State if the ball bounces it slightly differently in a few different ways. Or, if they have a kicker that's not trying to go to a finance internship in New York City instead of being a college kicker, but I digress. So I do like this line, but I do think there's a world where Clemson kind of wakes up and reminds us what they at least think they are. But I do like this bet. My final one, and I'm kind of cheating a little bit here in that I'm picking a Friday night game. So I'm going Utah plus 3.5 on the road at Oregon State. And obviously Oregon State is coming off a loss to Washington State, the Pac-2 championship, if you will. Then they had been playing very well up to that point. I do think, though, Washington State is just really good, and that's just how that played out for them. But, Utah is just getting no respect at this point, and they still really even haven't gotten their quarterback bet. I don't really know if Cameron Rising is going to be back for this game, but everybody just keeps sleeping on Utah. That defense is still really, really, really good. And, I'll say this, Oregon State wants to run the ball, and I think that does kind of play into what Utah wants because they know they can stop the run against pretty much anybody. And so if they can force the game, if they can essentially put the game back on DJU and say, hey, you've got to go win this game with your arm, I think we as ACC fans kind of know what happens there when an opposing team forces Uiagalelei to win a game with his arm as opposed to his feet. All right, Utah plus 3.5.
Okay. I'm going to stay in the ACC with my last one, and I'm going to go with Friday night. And I'm going to go with Louisville covering against they're 3.5 point favorites against NC State in Raleigh. And the reason I'm picking this, I look at the statistics. I look at what as NC State did last week, where they went wire to wire with UVA and almost lost that game. I saw what Louisville can be. I look at NC State's defense, and it's not good. They are in points 100. They were allowing 21.8 per game. They're allowing 114 yards on the ground, 211 passing yards. Statistics numbers that on the site I'm looking at aren't very accurate, so I apologize. But they're letting 350 yards up on offense every week. And I think Louisville is much better, and I didn't give them enough credit last week. And I think they're better than NC State.
Yeah, I still really don't. I think I don't even know if this will be the game where we really know what Louisville is, because, I think that I'm not saying they got lucky, but they just hit on all their explosives against BC. You get an extra touchdown thanks to a fake kneel down. And obviously, again, BC is not a good team by any stretch of the imagination at this point. So, I still don't really know where we are with Louisville. NC State is, like you said, kind of a weird team by their standards. They've obviously won most of their games, but the offense isn't really clicking despite the reuniting of Robert Anaya and Brennan Armstrong. I think they just lost their leading running back. He is no longer on the team or something. And I think they also are banged up on defense. So I think this is going to be a very interesting game to watch and be very telling for just how the rest of the ACC season will develop.
All right, that wraps things up. We'll be back on Sunday night. We'll be recording on YouTube. Monday morning, if you are on a podcast feed. Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. Just posted my VIP preview of the matchup report for this game, and then my weekly preview with my keys to victory matchups and predictions will be out tomorrow and Friday to preview the game. And before we go, I'll throw out one little nugget for this game. Look out for what is a play called dart read options for BC. It's where you run a read option, but the tackle that is to the same side of the back and shotgun, that tackle pulls to the other side of the offensive line. So watch out for dart read option against Virginia this Saturday.
All right. This is AJ Black. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247, and you can get my work at Eagle Insider. We'll be back again later this weekend with more talk about this game, with recaps and everything else that you need here on Locked On BC, your team every day. For Mitch, this is AJ. We'll see you all again soon.